ourselves through a company called Avail. But what are some of the systems like people who wanted to manage themselves to put in place to kind of help prevent some of the things that could go wrong in being a property manager?
All right. Well, I think that, the first thing is you need to make sure you can, you look at their credit score, and there's also all kinds of services online you can get where they can run your credit score online. And what we look at the most is mostly the judgments. If you've got some problems with medical bills and stuff like that, we can kind of forgive that, even though it does affect your credit score or your debt to income a little bit. We can kind of oversee that. But if they have a lot of outstanding judgments, I think I would be a little bit away. I would be a little bit leery. I also think that, a good rental reference. Why did they leave the last place that they were renting? And then the debt to income. You really want their debt to income to be 45% or less. That's just so you add what their rent's going to be plus all their debt, and then you calculate it that way. So that's what I think is the best thing to think of. And I always think that the people who promise you the most will give you the least. So if they talk to you and keep going on and on about what they're going to do, it's like I always think, so you kind of have to just learn how to read people. But with all the laws today, when you go through a real estate agent, we can't really do that. Like we don't, I don't even like to meet the people that are applying for my properties, because then it's a non-biased judgment on who just is the most qualified tenant. And I think that's very important in today, where if you manage it yourself and if you own less than 5 properties, you can just kind of choose your tenants, who you like. If you own 5 or more, then you have to accept Section 8. You have to make sure you go by all the laws. It becomes a little bit more complicated. So there's some benefits to managing it yourself.
So, just to go back to what you said when you said screening tenants, so someone who just, let's say, just bought their house, they want to be able to manage it themselves. How do they go about getting that information, or how do they get to where they can screen people or look up their debts, debt to income or something?
There's some great online services out there that you can join, and they'll run credit scores for you. So you can do that. And now some of them, then you'll have to do all the calling yourself, call to verify that they work here. You want to ask for pay stubs or bank statements, that kind of thing. And you'll have to call whoever their landlord was before. Or you could make up your own form. There's some great websites out there that offer forms and leases and that type of thing for them.
So, what are some of the systems that you put in place? Like, let's say you get the ideal tenant and everything like that. How do you? Because they always say like no one's going to treat a property like you would treat your property. So, what's some systems you put in place that more or less can help prevent like tenants from like trashing a place or anything
Right.
like that? Or
Well, first of all, you need to hand the property over exactly the way you want it back. And I mean like clean windows, clean window sills. You need to go in there and clean baseboards, have your AC serviced and clean. You need to have all the for one thing that people always skip is cleaning out the light fixtures. You need to have that property just spotless, top to bottom, the garage swept out. Don't leave old bottles of, you know, weed killer or fertilizer. I mean, clear that property out, because if you start leaving things in properties, like a lot of people want to do, or tenants will want to do that. Well, the next tenant might use that. Well, the next tenant might want to use that, but they need to buy their own, and it needs to go, because then you just start accumulating all this extra stuff. So the number one rule is you get it exactly the way you want it. Remote controls. Then you do the inventory and take a million pictures. Taking pictures of door jambs, toilets, the lids open, the lids shut. Underneath all the sinks. You need to take a million pictures to before you hand that property over, and then do a walkthrough with your tenant within the property and talk to them about what they need to do. this is the if the GFIs are in the circuit breaker, let them know everything about the house before when you walk them through it, so they'll know what you expect. Give them the sizes of the AC filters. Some people even give a year's supply and date them, but I've found them in trash cans, so that doesn't always work. But it is a way that you can label your filters. But I think that's the most important thing when you're managing yourself, is hand it over exactly the way you want it. Have the house totally, completely clean, clear, and do a walkthrough with those tenants prior to handing it over. And then the other thing is establish what is an emergency and what is not an emergency.
Yeah, I can
It's
see it.
weird the way the laws are, because heat is an emergency, AC is not. Um, Water is an emergency, no, hot water is not. So you need to establish with your tenants when you want phone calls on the weekends and in the middle of the night, and when you don't. And really set some guidelines and, okay, look, you need to call me about things during normal working hours unless these things occur. Because then you're going to have, if you get a tenant that tends to be a little bit, I want to say whiny, or, they tend to notice everything, then you're going to get a lot of phone calls, when you don't want phone calls.
Yeah,
So,
I can imagine.
yeah, so you just have to establish some boundaries, I think, with them, and put that in policy. Write your own policies up and tell them what you expect from the lawn. You can't make a tenant do anything that's biodegradable, so you can't make them mulch. You can make them keep weeds away, but you can't make them mulch. Can't make them power wash. Anything that comes back because of the environment or disintegrates because of the environment, you can't. So you just need to be very clear in your lease and in your policies of what you want those tenants to do.